Hi, and welcome to the Ask Dr. Angela show with everyone's favorite OBGYN, Dr. Angela Jones. Have you ever been just too embarrassed or shy to ask your own doctor a question about your, private stuff? Well, you have come to the right place to get straight answers. Feel free to ask Dr. Angela anything women's health related. OBGYN, she keeps it real. Pregnancy, she knows what you're expecting. Whole body health, just ask. Dr. Angela has you covered, girl. And now here is Dr. Angela.
What's good, people? This is Dr. Angela, everyone's self-proclaimed favorite OBGYN, and I would like to officially welcome you to episode 61 of the Ask Dr. Angela podcast. Happy New Year to all of you. Hopefully everyone had a wonderful break. I know most of you are happy that the kids are back in school so that you can get back on your grind. Anyway, funny thing over the break, I think that I've mentioned before that I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Not quite as huge as Peanuts, but it runs a very close second. So over the break, my wife and I had an opportunity to take our 6-year-old daughter to see The Force Awakens. And so certainly I had to give a little bit background to my 6-year-old. My wife, for the record, has never seen any of the Star Wars production, so I had to give her some background too. But back to my little one. So we're watching The Force Awakens, and she keeps asking, when are we going to see Princess Leia? When are we going to see Princess Leia? And I keep saying, she's coming up, because this is now my second go-around at seeing this movie. And so finally I say, all right, here we go. Here she comes. And it's like, dun-da-da-da. And talk about letdown. My daughter looks at me and she's like, Mommy, she doesn't look like Princess Leia. She's old. And of course, I burst out laughing. And quite honestly, she has a point. She is not Princess Leia. First of all, she's now General Leia, but she wasn't exactly the young woman with the 2 honey bun rolls on the side of her head with the long, white robe. So it was a perfect way for me to segue and say, well, you know what? It just means that you and I are going to have to watch the original Star Wars so that you can get the story from the beginning. So I'm really excited about that. Really excited about watching all the Star Wars. Again, I've seen them like a million times, but I'm excited to watch them with my daughter so that she can, experience the wonder of Star Wars. So let's jump right into today's topic. Today's topic is work up for heavy bleeding. And I can't tell you how many times a week I see women, young, older, that have issues with really heavy periods. And for me, the causes are, one of 2 groups. It's either going to be a structural cause or a non-structural cause. If we're thinking structural, it's going to be due to either polyp, a condition called adenomyosis, which in a nutshell is like a close cousin, like a first cousin to endometriosis, where instead of the lining being shot through the tubes and implanting, in various aspects of the pelvis, whether it's the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, the cul-de-sac, etc., that's endometriosis. What happens in adenomyosis is that those same glands or lining that typically is shed as your period, it starts to actually invade the musculature of the uterus, and it makes the uterus bigger, bulkier, it makes periods heavier, and oftentimes more painful. So I mentioned polyp, adenomyosis, leiomyoma, which is a fancy word for fibroids, and certainly last but not least, some sort of malignancy, i.e. cancer or hyperplasia, which is abnormal cells. So those are the structural causes that are responsible for abnormal uterine bleeding. The non-structural causes can be anything ranging from a coagulopathy, which is an underlying bleeding disorder, to ovulatory dysfunction, to endometrial, iatrogenic, which means that we don't really know, and finally not yet classified. The reason that I go over all of these causes is because there are many different things that have to be ruled in or out when you're undergoing a workup for abnormal uterine bleeding or really heavy periods, bleeding, whatever. Most of that is going to start with a very thorough history. A thorough history, there's nothing that can replace it. And that's just, taking an in-depth look into the characteristics of your bleeding, how often you're getting, this irregular bleeding, how long it's lasting, and actually trying to quantify how much bleeding you're having. Sometimes we use pictures, use fruit to describe, the size of clots that are being passed, etc. It typically will also involve any significant family history, whether there are any underlying bleeding disorders, whether or not there's any risk or chance that you might have an underlying infection. This includes the STIs, ladies. Whether or not you could possibly be pregnant. So, a lot of in-depth questions just so that we can kind of figure out what's going on. And then certainly, this typically will involve some sort of laboratory evaluation, everything ranging from pregnancy tests to checking the CBC to make sure that you're not anemic, to maybe, if history warrants, checking coagulation profiles and studies to make sure that you don't have some underlying bleeding or clotting disorder, thyroid levels, prolactin levels, perhaps cervical cultures, and maybe even an endometrial biopsy. All of these things are potential means of working up this abnormal uterine bleeding. And certainly last but not least, of course, you're going to get an ultrasound. The ultrasound is the gold standard of imaging in my realm, i.e. OBGYN. It kills me when I see people that present to the ER with pelvic pain and everybody wants to do a CT. Nobody gets the ultrasound. And again, that is the gold standard of imaging anything in the pelvis, i.e. uterus and ovaries and tubes. I hope that this podcast has given you some inkling into the types of things that we're looking at and that we're seeking out when we do a workup for heavy periods, abnormal uterine bleeding, etc. This way, when you go see your OBGYN, you're not completely blindsided and wondering what the hell it is we're looking for or searching for. So I'm hoping that this podcast has added some value to someone's day. And in closing, I would just like to say thank you again for all of your continued support. I have such a good time doing these podcasts, and they are reaching people near and far, everywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast, transatlantic and Pacific. I'm just amazed at the response and the messages that I receive either via email or direct messaging via social media. So, having said that, if you have a topic or question that you would like featured on the Ask Dr. Angela podcast, please feel free to submit it. Go to www.askdrangela, that's AskDrangela.com. Click on the microphone on the right-hand side of the page and do what you do. If we do feature your question on the podcast, someone from my team will reach out to you and they will send you one of our bomb-ass t-shirts. And they are bomb-ass. Just check out social media. People are posting pictures wearing them. They're all over the place. In closing, I would like to leave you with this statement from Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin once said, "You may delay, but time will not." I say that to say this. There is no time like the present, people. Let's get it going. So until next time, look better, feel better, be better. Can't wait to reconnect on episode 62. See you later.
Thank you for listening to the Ask Dr. Angela podcast. For more information on women's health and the show notes for this episode, please visit Dr. Angela at www.askdrangela.com. While you're there, don't forget to leave your own message for Dr. Angela. See you soon. All of the information provided and discussed in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not take the place of consulting a physician. This podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases or illnesses and does not and should not replace treatment for a medical professional. Listening to and participating in this podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and Dr. Angela Jones. If you need medical advice or assistance, you should consult a physician. Listening to and participating in this podcast is subject to the terms and conditions posted at drangela.com/terms.